High on a hill, 422 feet above the ocean on the tip of Point Loma, sits the historic Old Lighthouse. The beacon was first ignited 162 years ago to guide ships and their crews through the darkness.
This is Lighthouses of San Diego, a book that Kim and I wrote together.
Today, 67-year-old twin sisters Karen Scanlon and Kim Fallon are working to keep its history shining bright.
We'll have to do some work.
It's what they do every 6 weeks, climb to the top of the 40-foot-tall spiral staircase inside the white brick lighthouse tower.
Oh, this big, beautiful doll. But this is our baby. Well, this is just such a treat to be able to do this.
They polish the massive jewel-like Fresnel lens.
We just never imagined in our lives that we would have this privilege. I mean, we're the only two that clean this lens.
People want to just come up and clean the lens. They think that's all we do. We have to clean the walls and the windows and the ditches.
To Scanlon and Fallon, the 6-hour task is no chore. They cherish it.
See where we clean it? Look at that rag.
They use their grandmother's old linen towels to wipe each layer of glass that radiates in prism colors.
Now, they're not building these lenses anymore. So if we don't preserve them now in places like Cabrillo National Monument, then we lose it.
And it actually is a concern that ultimately, what is the next generation going to think about them?
Their passion for lighthouses reaches back to a childhood camping trip they took with their father to the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse in North Carolina. They were 12 years old. For Fallon, it was life-changing.
So lighthouses stayed in my head and heart forevermore after that.
Scanlon's lighthouse enthusiasm came years later.
We always said that the lighthouse bug bit Kim then, and the mosquitoes bit me.
The Old Point Loma Lighthouse was one of the first buildings in San Diego. It was the last of 8 lighthouses constructed along the west coast.
This lighthouse should have been one of the first to open, but it was not because the ship that was carrying supplies for this lighthouse and several others sank on the bar of the Columbia River.
Each lighthouse featured a unique light, some flashed or rotated, to signal the mariner of their location. Point Loma's was a fixed white beacon, lit with whale oil.
It never needed to rotate. It was the only light out here.
Below the light tower was a bustling 2-story home for the keeper and his family, who kept the light aflame.
They were all vigilant. They were all watching for ships and problems out there.
This old lighthouse first stood watch over the entrance to San Diego Bay on November 15, 1855. It stayed lit for 36 years.
But it was built too high, and too often the low clouds and fog obscured the light. In its day, it was the highest lighthouse in the United States, but that was its nemesis ultimately.
So in 1891, the light was extinguished and a new lighthouse opened at the bottom of the hill, near the edge of the shore. Although it's currently under renovation, it's still active today, illuminating the tip of the point from 20 miles offshore.
I went nuts down there, finding the history of it.
The sisters grew up in Ohio and moved to San Diego with their husbands after college.
We haven't done the spider webs up there yet, have we?
Both raised 2 children. They've traveled the world to see lighthouses.
Germany and France and Netherlands.
Their bond is deep.
I can see where you wipe dust on my clean prisms.
They've spent much of their lives together researching and writing about Point Loma's lighthouses.
Here was the active light station, and Old Point Loma is up here, and Ballast Point Light clear out there.
Who were the keepers? Who were the families that lived there?
They've interviewed children of lighthouse keepers from generations ago who were raised on the desolate seashore. It was their playground.
Looking at sharks playing in pools of water. When the tide goes out down here, they lived right there, so they had little swimming pools.
As years went by, the old lighthouse at the top of the hill was nearly torn down several times.
And it fell into terrible ruin. It was really it was nothing more than a skeleton.
And it was used in the war, 2 war efforts, World War I and World War II.
As a signal station for alerting ships that were coming in for the anti-submarine net.
The iconic old lighthouse was restored and relit by the National Park Service in 1984. Today, it serves solely to bring history to life and to brighten up Point Loma with its beauty.
Seeing it sitting on the hill and it's its own little modest self, and you see the big ships coming by, and to think of the sailing ships that came by initially.
Sisters Scanlon and Fallon say they'll continue their work to preserve the iconic treasure.
And then the icing on the cake is putting our hands on that glass and treating it lovingly and cleaning it.
So that the beacon that once lighted a path for ships and stood the test of time never goes dim. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.